Ramona Fradon should be up here shortly.
Your press?
Yes.
That was told.
Yeah, my friend is looking into an escort her.
Okay. And there was some other canvas here? Or that was here?
Yeah.
Someone's bringing it along. And like I said, Wade will be here and he's supposed to be late. Awesome, thank you.
Well, I guess until they get here, you can drill me about science questions if you I'm a science teacher, so I'm used to it.
We know high school kids don't ask questions.
Oh, no, never, never. Unless it involves their grade, then they're very poignant. Why did you take off over here?
Will there be a quiz?
We can make one. Yeah. Why is the sky blue? Well,
Next question.
so our atmosphere has a lot of different molecules in it that comprise it, and as the radiation comes through, it retains some of the blue color from the white light.
Learn something today, look at
Yeah.
I have a question. It's a
Yeah.
comic book question.
Okay.
How would you explain the power cosmic through a scientific method?
Oh gosh, our cosmic.
How would you break that down? Curious.
I have deliberated on this. You know, I love the Silver Surfer, and you know he has the power cosmic, and the ramifications of the power cosmic essentially can do about anything that you want it to do. So it has to be something that gets to the very core of our existence. So I would assume that it would be something very quantum mechanically entwined.
Kind of like the God molecule?
Yeah, so, similar to that. So it could be, you know, maybe they're able to manipulate the Higgs boson and
Right.
other ionic
Gotcha.
and other forces, maybe ionic forces.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Where does the Hulk's extra mass come from tiny Bruce Banner?
Yeah, he does violate the. Maybe he becomes more hollow. So yeah. Bruce Banner's very dense, and then when he turns into the Hulk, he's just like a big hollow bunny.
There actually is an official Marvel answer to that question.
Please share.
This is going back to when I used to follow comics before most of you were born. In the Marvel handbooks, that they obviously have thought about this. There's a hidden dimension where the Hulk draws mass from it when Ant-Man shrinks.
Ant-Man, yeah.
He shunts it.
Yeah.
That's the official explanation.
Which watching Ant-Man, I mean, it was a lovely movie. But when they're saying that he's shrinking the space between molecules, I'm like that just bugged me so much, because I'm like, okay, if you're going to go into that scale, then he should be. I felt like they should have gone more into it in saying that they are shrinking the distance between electrons and the nucleus, because that's where the biggest change is. Like if the Earth were an atom, the nucleus would be about the size of an orange, and in the center. So if they could just reduce some of that repulsion between the protons and electrons, then you could dramatically reduce size. So I felt like that was a wasted opportunity on their part. It's just good. Yeah.
Yes, how does Superman fly? Like, how can he change velocities while in the air?
Yes, okay. To be able, so of course there has to be equal and opposite forces. I don't know how in the world he can get air to basically be a wall and a force to pull back on him when he changes direction mid-flight, but I would assume that maybe he can manipulate matter in that way and that he can just change the velocity there.
Hey, nice job vamping the crowd. Oh, I apologize. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit late.
This is Mark Waid.
Hey, how are you? Please, sit down. It's okay.
I was just letting them grill me in science questions.
Actually, so what is your background in this thing?
I am a high school science teacher,
Okay.
and I love comic books, and I'm trying to make a chemistry comic book to teach my students how to.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Which I've given all of you a copy of, and I'll be giving you a.
Oh, please, thank you.
Also.
Excellent.
Me and this gentleman here, if he'd like to introduce himself. This is Josh Reynolds. He is the artist on,
Hey, Josh.
on that. So yeah, we're trying to make, do some smart comics.
What's the greatest challenge for you to turn something that is basically academic into something that is visually oriented and has a narrative to it?
So most of my kids don't want to read a textbook,
Right.
As most kids don't. But I want them to understand the real world concepts of how chemistry applies to everything.
Yeah.
And so, there's lots of really rich stories, like every metal is every element is pretty much toxic or harmful to you to some extent, to some degree. So I just try to find stories, create a compelling narrative for them to enjoy the characters, and then sort of subconsciously learn the science as they go through it.
That's really smart. So you can sort of stealth learn them.
Yeah, trying. Yeah, that's the goal.
Cool.
Yeah.
Excellent.
But you put a lot of science in comics.
I do put a lot of science in comics. I was a physics minor in college. That was a long time ago, and they hadn't discovered but 82 elements. That's not true.
And then the rest of them were radioactive.
Exactly. But I was always a science kid. I was never a mythology kid. I have a huge respect for mythology, and I have a huge respect for fantasy novels and so forth and so on. But it's the science stuff that I always gravitated to in comics and in fiction and in my interests. And so, like I said, physics minor, and still read tons of scientific material every day, just because you're finding out new ways of doing things and seeing, especially writing for the Marvel universe, writing for characters like Tony Stark and so forth. You see a story like what was it, Thursdays, the one where they did the quantum entanglement over 62 miles, whatever, where what they're doing is they're manipulating the electrons from one atom over here and then 62 miles across in a fiber, but at the end of the fiber optic, another atom is moving in the exact same, basically, doing this and then puppetizing over here the same atom. That's very close to teleportation. That's very close to what we think of in fiction terms as teleportation or telekinesis or mind control or whatever, because you're affecting over a long distance things that shouldn't be connected. That's like, that is, for those who are not really into science, that is tantamount to my saying, I'm going to take a left turn with my Volvo, and then in the next city, your Volvo suddenly turns left. So there's no reason for that, but there is what we call quantum entanglement, as you know. So the idea that something over here can affect something over here where there's no visible connection. And that's just one example. You find ways of, you see stuff like that, and then it's either a background element for a story where Tony mentions something about quantum entanglement, and that lets you know that he's reading the same cool stuff that you are, or you make it a plot point. Like I did something with the Justice League a few years ago, where I did a story that was, again, about quantum entanglement, but it was the idea that somebody has broken the connection between atoms, and in doing so, they've affected the causal probability on a global scale, where things just, the improbable just starts happening, the impossible just starts happening, and it's happening on a bigger and bigger scale. So, I don't know, it's just such a rich source of story material.
It is. I'm glad you brought up the JLA thing, because when I was reading that, I'm like, this is just analogous to quantum entanglement.
Yeah.
This is brilliant. And another really interesting thing about the quantum entanglement is that we're not really sure how the electrons or particles entangle, but they just stick them close to one another and eventually they entangle somehow. And then they separate them. And then when so electrons have a certain spin. If you change the spin, it will change the spin over here, but that happens instantaneously. So that's faster than the speed of light.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Yes. Ramona Fradon, everybody. So that's faster than the speed of light, and we don't, that's sort of beyond our comprehension of what we know that can be done. So just brave new worlds that need to be explored.
I'm just turning everything over to her. So.
That sounded pretty awesome what you were just saying. So anyway.
Well, everybody's here now. Superheroes under a microscope. So we're just looking at superheroes under a scientific lens to see how these things are possible or just completely absurd either way. And of course, now you know all this things that we've done. But so one of me having a chemistry background, things that just tickles me is Ramona has designed and co-created a character that is quintessentially chemistry walking around.
Yeah.
And Mark has also written some stories about this character. It is Metamorpho. I love this character. He's amazing, and if you could share some stories about the character.
Well, I certainly can't come at it from the scientific point of view, but I like Metamorpho especially because he was so hideous looking and yet he was a romantic hero. I thought that was quite a feat for the writer to pull off. And I think it was George Kashdan who supplied all the scientific background for Metamorpho, and Bob Haney just fleshed out the plots. So I think I'd do better if you just asked me some questions because I don't have any prepared stuff to tell you about this.
Well, but the design 100% yours?
Yeah, I think it was. It was a long time ago, but we used to have conferences when they first, invented the character. And I put him in capes and masks and, the usual superhero stuff. And somehow it didn't work. And then I think I finally figured out that since his body was always changing, into different compounds and things, that he shouldn't have any clothes on. So it would get in the way, So I just designed it with his tights, and the odd thing is he came out of that pyramid with an M on his belt buckle. That's what I like about comics.
As luck would have it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, we went from there. I designed the other characters, and, the basic characters, Simon Stagg and Sapphire and Java. And Java was inspired by my brother, who used to beat me up when I was little. I got back at him. So, this isn't very, as I said, not very scientific. But I have met some fans who said they became chemical engineers inspired by Metamorpho. So that was nice. I felt good about that.
Awesome. That's great story. And how was your writing the character?
I love writing Metamorpho. He's so irreverent, and and as Rex Mason, he was Indiana Jones before Indiana Jones was Indiana Jones. He was a fortune hunter, and that was cool. But I like characters with limitations. I like superheroes with limitations to their powers because it makes the stories a lot more interesting. And what people generally keep forgetting about Metamorpho is he can't turn into any element. He can't just suddenly become plutonium because he can win every fight if he did that. He can't just become kryptonite if he fights Superman. He's limited to, he's a Rubik's Cube of elements in the human body. He's limited only by the elements and compounds in the human body. Which is basically, as I understand it, like basically 14 big elements.
I was unaware of that, actually.
Yes. It's not that he can transmute into anything. It's that it took, and it's there in the original stories. It just took the elements that are in his body already and just scrambled them up. So he can only turn into things that can be found in the human body, or compounds that can be created by the elements in the human body.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Look at that. I am now schooled the co-creator and the chemistry teacher.
I thought that since it was fire, air, earth, and water, isn't it? Isn't that aren't those
The ancient elements?
Ancient
Yeah.
elements. And of course, Metamorpho looks like he's made up of wood and metal and water or something like that, and then some horrible skin disease. I don't know what that represented. But that, I never realized that it was limited to the human body.
Yeah.
Actually made a slide based on trying to figure out what the 4 parts of Metamorpho were.
I'm very interested.
The orange part, there's not really anything that's solid necessarily that would give off that color, but bromine gas has a little bit of that color. So if he could take all the bromine in his body, which I would assume would be very little, and condense it into a solid, that could be the orange part, and his white head could be phosphorus. There are different types of elemental phosphorus. So there's white phosphorus, and the purple on his left side could also be a different form of phosphorus, and how phosphorus changes its colors as it changes the bond lengths between interacting with other phosphorus atoms.
I'm listening, but I'm looking stuff up as you talk, so go ahead.
And then one of his legs, certainly looks like copper, so that's probably copper. And one of them looks like a metal, so it could be any of the metals, but I just said possibly silver because that's where we get it has a silver color. So
Okay, here's your list. Okay, there are certain elements. You got oxygen is the greatest component of the human body.
right.
I wrote this down for DC years ago. Carbon is next. Hydrogen at 10%. Nitrogen, calcium, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, and sodium, magnesium, and then you get to the trace elements. You got about 0.7% of the following. You get copper, zinc, selenium, molybdenum, fluorine, chlorine, iodine, manganese, cobalt, and iron, and then the super trace amounts that there's just little tiny little bits of lithium, strontium, aluminum, silicon, lead, vanadium, arsenic, and bromine, and presumably even maybe some mercury if he had fillings. So, so does that jive with what you got there?
The phosphorus, if you can turn the phosphorus that's in our body into elemental phosphorus, then certainly. The bromine, that's a far-fetched. That probably wouldn't happen. Copper, there's so little that it wouldn't be able to cover a whole leg, maybe one toe.
Let's assume that because, for instance, you can turn into a cloud of bromine or something like that. Let's assume that even though it's scrambled, it's not necessarily the relative amount still. Let's assume that there's enough flexibility to it where he can become an iron statue, even though obviously there's not enough iron to actually become in the human body to actually become a statue. So if that's the case, then it still works, right?
Yeah, okay. That's fine.
I'm trying.
Thanks. I feel.
No. This is now. Ask me where my keys are. I don't know that. Ask me where my hotel room is. I don't know that, but I know this. So.
Awesome. All right. So another awesome character that Ramona has drawn and Mark has written is Aquaman. Ramona actually co-created, right?
No, I didn't co-create it.
Aqualad. Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Aqualad. which is awesome. So there's some interesting scientific points up there, but if you could share drawing up
Yeah, I feel
and
like
up.
such a dope. I mean, I don't know all this science
No,
stuff.
you have been a solid contributor to this. I mean, if it weren't for you having the visions to put this, stuff in the pages.
I guess.
Also, nobody cares I can rattle off a list off my iPhone. What they care about is what it looks like and how it made them feel.
I
So that
know.
it really did a great job. You came onto Aquaman in the early 50s, I want to say,
Yeah,
right? You've done
right.
Shining Knight and a couple of other things at DC. Who was your editor?
Yeah, mostly, well, in the beginning it was Murray Goldenough, and then I worked with George Cashdan for most of the time.
Okay.
And Aquaman, I hate to say, but I really didn't enjoy drawing Aquaman. Because I never liked drawing superheroes per se, because to me, they never had personalities. They weren't people that I could understand. They didn't interact with each other except to hit smash, that kind of thing. And that's why I really enjoyed Metamorpho, because those were characters that were interacting. I could recognize them and I could articulate them, and for me it was a lot of fun. Plastic Man too, in a different way. I like Goofy. I always liked the Goofy strips.
Yeah.
So Aquaman was very straight. And when I was drawing it, we lived way out in the country in Connecticut, and there was no research available, and there were no iPads and that kind of thing. So I never did much research, and I think if you look at those fish closely that I drew, you'll see the line of them. But the thing about fish is they're so varied, it doesn't matter, they're so inventive. And I must say that while I was drawing Aquaman, I did kind of have a crush on him. He was such a nice, clean-cut 50s kind of a guy. And I hated it when they put a beard on him and a book and made him psychotic. I think he's going back a little bit.
A little bit.
He's got his hand back.
At least he got his hand back, yeah.
So anyway, I don't know. I have to be asked questions. I really don't know what else to say about drawing is hard, in case anybody's interested. It's really a lot of hard work too, especially for me, laying out the layouts are hard. I like doing the figures a lot. But I'm really inspired and enjoy doing goofy characters. That's been my pleasure when I've been doing comics and doing the mysteries, because I could exaggerate, I could never be serious about comics. I just couldn't take them seriously. I never got into that kind of mythic feeling, I just couldn't summon that up when I drew. So, here I am.
How was drawing, or no, sorry, writing?
Right, it was hard. It was hard for me to find a voice for the character, but I kind of hit upon it when we were doing Kingdom Come. This idea that he has a bit of a chip on his shoulder a little bit because all the rest of the world has all the other superheroes, and he has the oceans, and that's there's 70% of the world is that, and he's only got one guy to control that. So, but Michael Ringo, this artist that I adored, who I work with on Fantastic Four, but we did a proposal for an Aquaman relaunch a few years ago, and it's one of my favorite things we ever did, and it never got anywhere because we did it at a time when nobody wanted anything but grim and ugly and dark and cool heroes. I just thought, that's not what I want Aquaman to be. Aquaman is like, the ocean is a lot of people's sort of peaceful place, right? It's the, when you talk about going to your happy place and relaxing, a lot of people think about being on the beach and there's the crash of the waves and stuff. And and the ocean's mysterious too. So Mike had done up some beautiful sketches, and our take on him was just that he was a mysterious man of the depths, but always had a smile on his face. And he didn't say much because he didn't have to. It's not like you can have a lot of conversations underwater. But he did his thing, and we told it from the point of view of a Russian oceanographer who became the love interest. But at first it was just, he everybody knows the Justice League, but still, if you're a Russian oceanographer, you don't have any connection to these characters. It's not like you see them saving your city all the time. So it was kind of a myth to her, and sort of watching her get into his world and see Atlantis and see the underworld. Again, think about the power of that. Anybody who thinks that Aquaman is goofy or silly or dopey or ineffective, go to SeaWorld sometime and I don't see people walk around SeaWorld going, well, this is stupid. No, it's a cruel place, but that's a whole different story. I just think, or the Baltimore Aquarium across the harbor. I mean, you go there because it's magnificent, because the creatures are amazing, because the ocean has such depth and mystery and power to it, and that's really cool. There's nothing, people watch Shark Week like it was the Super Bowl. So don't tell me that Aquaman's dope. Aquaman's part of that world.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's wild that we've been to the moon, but we haven't even explored not even close to a large portion of our oceans.
Right.
It's wild to me.
Yeah.
So some of the science behind Aquaman, like how can so we look at Aquaman and a lot of people think he's a little dopey, and then we see Superman, but our concept of why Superman is so tough is Krypton, and part of that explanation is, well, Krypton's density or gravitational pull was so much greater, so his bones and stuff are adapt to that. But if you're living at the bottom of the sea,
absolutely,
that is going to be your body it would be about the equivalent of living on Krypton as far as the gravitational pull on you and all this pressure. So Aquaman is as tough as Superman. Just looking at the science in terms of gravitational pull.
Yeah, wouldn't you think he'd explode when he came out from that happens, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, with the lungs, if you don't have the lung pressures regulated well enough, yeah, you could.
This is fascinating because I stopped doing Aquaman back in 1960, and nobody ever thought to flesh him out as a character. It just never occurred to anybody who was writing that. These things were done for kids, and it was just for the story, nothing else, no character at all. And it's really interesting to me to listen to writers talk, because they're constantly investigating and adding, and it reminds me like of Greek drama. They had these wonderful distant gods, and then Euripides came along and began to psychoanalyze them in a sense, give them personalities, and the same process seems to be going on here with the writers.
Yeah, I think it can be taken too far if you're really trying to dissect the characters deeply in terms of their science and so forth and so on. That's fun to do, but ultimately they can fly. Ultimately, there's a sense of wonder. There's a sort of what's the word I'm looking for? The suspension of disbelief that has to go with the characters. But I think that, speaking for myself, that's the fun of working with the character. Just as for you, the fun of it is capturing that look or capturing that expression that you're trying to get, or the fact you have a crush on Aquaman. The idea that that's the fun of it to you, and for somebody like me, the fun of it is thinking about things like, all right, he lives underwater, so when he speaks above the water, he speaks in the air, you can't hear him. He mutters because sound travels so much better underwater. His indoor voice, the voice he uses underwater would carry much further, but when he's above the water in the air, he's speaking like he normally would, but everybody's constantly going, I'm sorry, what was that? Just the little things like that are the fun to me of thinking about these characters on a sort of scientific level.
Yeah, well, see, to show you how little we thought of that back then, remember Superman used to fly through the air and his hair never got mussed?
I know.
It never bothered him.
No.
Anything real,
Talking about messing up hair, how can Aquaman go so fast? Like, he can swim extraordinarily fast. I don't think they mess his hair up either.
No.
But if you look at dolphins, one of the reasons that they can swim so fast is they actually shed their skin at an incredible rate,
Yeah.
and that sort of breaks up some of the vertices that would slow them down.
I'm sorry, hang on for a second. Somebody apparently left a portfolio here for a second. See anything down there? Anything?
Is this yours?
No, but that's the one we're looking for. Good news. Good news, Wheezy, we found your portfolio. There we go. Excellent. She gets the credit. Go away. You had your panel. Go away.